We are in Ventureforth, which is part of this explosion of co-location facilities, co-working spaces and incubators and accelerators. How valuable is that in kind of creating density of talent? Why is it important that there are these spaces in markets to kind of create talent around there? What's valuable about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you said density. The word that I typically use is cluster, that you have to geographically cluster the resources just so that they are available. Now, it doesn't have to be millions of people, it doesn't have to be tens of thousands of people, but if it's just tens of people or hundreds of people who are clustered geographically around the effort, that is one of the important keys to success.
Why?
Because people talk. You need the creativity that emerges in a place like Ventureforth, where you have 30 companies who are all working cheek by jowl, and this was one of the underlying premises of Dreamit as well, which is where the magic happens is when you have a cohort, a sufficient cohort of really hardworking, really creative people working next to each other. It builds incredible collegiality as well as healthy competition. When somebody is pushing product, you tend to stay later that night when the company next to you is doing it. So you need both the physical proximity, and then you also need physical proximity to investors. They have to be able to, not only be able to, they have to actually come in and get to know the companies early on, and investors can offer tremendous value beyond just the money. So to help the companies get started, that's a critical part of the ecosystem. You need a pool of talent. You need developers if you're doing technology. And you need them to be located physically in proximity to each other so that they learn about what's going on and they can help each other out with problems. It really is an amazing community, and I feel very privileged to be allowed into it. Just to see the energy, excitement, creativity, enthusiasm behind these companies, it's a contagious energy.
Yeah, it's been a great experience here at Ventureforth. Normally we're housed at the Science Center, which is fantastic and works out well. And it's the cohort of entrepreneurs, 40 to 50 entrepreneurs within Dreamit. What's been interesting about being located here at Ventureforth is there's even a broader community beyond Dreamit Health. And in fact, several of our companies are already working with Dreamit alumni that are located here, as well as other companies, just because they're socializing together, they're brainstorming together. It's a huge benefit and huge component in getting traction and validation faster.
So Dreamit, as you mentioned, the broad program outside of Dreamit Health, the broad program is in Tel Aviv, in Austin, in New York, and Philadelphia. Maybe talk, and in all of your experiences being in other markets, how is a Tel Aviv, kind of a large international, large city, New York, which has, even if its technology community is newer, it has a history of at least a century of being a finance hub, as opposed to a Philadelphia, or even in Austin, which has a reputation, but it's still a much smaller market. How is that different for Dreamit, and how might there be lessons that come out of that if you're building an ecosystem around big market as opposed to a smaller one? Any kind of lessons learned from Dreamit there?
Yeah, you have to leverage the advantage of a small market if you are a small market. So for example, in Philadelphia, the absolute number of entrepreneurs per capita is less than we have in Dreamit Austin, or in Israel for that matter, which has the highest percentage of entrepreneurs per capita in the world. I'm sorry, outside of Silicon Valley, the highest concentration of entrepreneurs per capita. But what you do, and what we find in Philadelphia, is that there is a sufficient cohort of people in the ecosystem to make it successful, and they make up for what they lack in numbers with enthusiasm. So you have people who are incredibly dedicated, be it service providers like law firms, be it companies like Comcast, and Independence Blue Cross and Penn Medicine, or be it accounting firms, be it mentors. I mean, the mentors who we have in Philadelphia who are been there, done that entrepreneurs, they devote an incredible amount of time and energy at virtually no compensation.
Yeah. So maybe speak a bit about that. I mean, I'm picturing the network, the infrastructure that has come and has roots in the past. I mean, all of you had careers before Dreamit, and there's no shortage of those stories of maybe those 90s era technology companies that had that spillover talent. How much more does a Philadelphia need to be able to flourish? Let me rephrase, like how important is that spillover of successful company that creates wealth to either invest or start new ventures? How much does that play into kind of creating this second generation of technology communities?
I think is a major component, because what it does is it gets the region more comfortable with risk. So you have an opportunity to see what happens when this new company went out on its own and tried to make something happen. It worked. It now has 4 or 5 or 6 new entrepreneurs that have had that experience and are ready to do their own ventures as well. And so as the region becomes more comfortable with the risk and risk taking, then you start to see more and more early stage capital starting to come in, and you see more and more people starting to consider that as a path for them, because they've now seen it work as opposed to seeing it fail. And I think all of that becomes very contagious for the region.
What is the mission that kind of underlines the work that Dreamit's doing, or anyone who's kind of accelerating companies? The short is making successful companies, but to what end? Like what are we doing as a technology community? What are we trying to have happen?
There are 2 principal pole stars for Dreamit. The first is to help great people with good ideas build great companies. And the second is return for investors. So we're not asking people to invest money out of charity. People are investing in these companies expecting a return, and that is very healthy in the entire ecosystem. The returns for our investors have been exceptional, and we think that the companies that we're launching are worthy of the investment and the exceptional returns that they generate.